Well, hey there everyone. Kaye here on my homestead in Tennessee on a gray, wet, cold day. It's not freezing. It was raining this morning. I may be clearing my throat a few times because I have been down with a cold for 6 days. But as I was driving home, I thought I have to mark this day because today, December 1st, 2020, I took possession of this house. Now, my things were in storage in California and they did not arrive till just before Christmas. And so I was sleeping on, my brother gave me a cot that you put for camping, a cot, and I had a sleeping bag, and I just put that in front of the fireplace, and I had a lantern. A flashlight, and I had my senior cat. Now I just realized I'm not going to be able to excuse me. Oh, I'm back. Had to blow my nose. I've done that quite a bit this week. But I had to mark the anniversary of my arrival here. And the morning that I took possession, I was at the title office in Murfreesboro, actually, and I looked out from my hotel room, and they're close to the title office, and there was about a half an inch of snowy ice on top of my car, my Prius, which is not a great car for winter weather, but I was a California girl for 32 years, so one of the first things I set out to do was to get myself a pickup truck, and I did. And that pickup truck is this color. This color, which is late bloomer red. It wasn't easy to find that pickup truck either. You know, I had a dealer looking for me, and a couple, 3 or 4 dealers actually, Chevrolet dealers. I wanted a Chevrolet because my father was a Chevrolet dealer, and he was a big NASCAR fan, and I didn't plan on talking about him at all, but it just came up. And we always had Chevrolets. He had a demonstrator. It was called a demonstrator, so he would get a new model. He would always get the largest model because we had a family of 6, 4 children, and he packed us into an Impala, Chevrolet Impala. I don't know if they still make those. I don't think they do. It was very stylish. And he packed us into that Impala until the Caprice came out. And then we had a Caprice. And when I was in high school, now my father let me borrow his car, but he said, you can't. I had a boyfriend who lived out in the country. Oh, no one got hurt, trust me. Okay. Anyway, he said, okay, you can drive it around town. He let me drive the Caprice. Now, this thing had a whopping big engine, and that thing weighed a friggin' ton. Well, hello there. That's the heater coming on. I'm sure you can hear it. Hold on. So he had told me I could borrow the car to drive around town. Now, I don't even know if I would feel comfortable driving a Caprice today because they're so big. It was a big, heavy car with a big engine. And I was instructed not to leave town, the city limits. Well, no, I think I was just supposed to drive it around the square. I don't know. But I don't remember exactly what he told me. But I know I wasn't supposed to go to my boyfriend's who lived out in the county. And I thought, what's it gonna hurt? I'll just go out there for an hour and come back. And so I was driving back, and I realized I was going too fast. You know, when you're an inexperienced driver, this is a mistake inexperienced drivers make all the time. They're going too fast and they don't realize how long it's going to take to brake and to get their car under control before they hit somebody. Anyway, I was coming up upon this intersection. And over the years, this intersection had a traffic light and didn't have a traffic light. You know, whoever was in public office, I guess, they voted it in, they voted it out, I don't know. But there were 3 cars sitting at that intersection waiting to turn onto the highway, the bigger highway. And all 2-lane roads, you know. And I realized I was going too fast that if I slammed on the brakes, I didn't know what would happen. I've never slammed on the brakes in that car. I mean, I didn't know what would happen. And I panicked. And the only thought I had was, it's better to hit a parked car than to hit a car with somebody in it. I had this presence of mind to make that decision. Swerved to the right, flew into this parking lot. What's the word? I smacked 3 cars. Swiped, I think that was the word. I swiped 3 cars. And of course I damaged my father's car. Well, needless to say, he wasn't pleased because he knew where I had been. And so that's a lesson for you young people. Get to know your vehicle before you do anything you're not supposed to do. But hey, even better, don't do what you're not supposed to do. Okay? Don't do what I did. I was grounded for quite some time. Anyway, that's that. And I'm having cat trouble. Just wanted to check in with you because I haven't been on camera, haven't talked to you guys in a week. A week. I haven't been able to talk. I had too much congestion, too much of a sore throat. It's too hard to talk. I've been out of circulation. So I thought, hey, I wouldn't do it. I was going to come home from the doctor and go straight to bed. And I went, it's December the 1st, Kaye. You were going to do something. Put on one of your hand knit sweaters and make a video. So that's what I did. You know, since I've been here, I have wanted to share my hand knit sweaters. I think that first year I did a few videos, and I think maybe I wore 1 or 2. I think you've seen, well, if you're new here, I used to knit a lot. I was the person in the family, if the family was sitting around watching a movie, I had to be doing that. I could not sit still and do nothing. I got all of that from my mother. All of that, gotta be busy, gotta be working, gotta be producing. I got that all from my mother. You know, because when my father left work, he put in, you know, he was a businessman, he was Navy, 3 years, World War II, Navy, South Pacific, and then at least 4, maybe 6 years of reserves in the Guard. Wait, I guess it was the reserves, yeah. And he had that 6, 12, and 6. We ate at 6, 12, and 6. Okay? My mother did not waver from those meal times, and you know, that was our life. So regimented. This is stream of consciousness here. But I have never in my life been so reminded, when you look at what's going on today, the unraveling of the nuclear family. I am so grateful. Somebody posted something on Twitter the other day about this, and I wrote, and I think I said, the older and more awake I become, the more grateful I am of my upbringing, and that I had won the parental lottery. I feel like me and my sister and my brothers did win the lottery when it comes to growing up in a secure, disciplined, righteous family, and that, you know, that never leaves you. And so I'm just so grateful, because I hear such stories, you know, just from one of my old friends revealed things to me recently, and that they were dealing with, and another new friend revealed their upbringing, which was both of them very traumatic. And I just realized, wow, you know, I just thought that my parents were too strict. You know, okay, that's not a big deal in the scheme of things. Enough about that. So, about my sweaters, if you're new here. Well, if you're new here, I've been an actor for 40-something years. That was my profession. I left California, and that seems to have... I'm still in the union. I'm still... My credentials are still on a casting service out there, but nothing's happening on that front. I'd love to make a short film myself, and that's entirely possible now with digital. But we'll see. You know, I have so much responsibility here. But what I thought I would do this winter is make videos and go through all my sweaters and various interesting things that I might have, and see if that's of interest to people. So please leave me a comment below if that's of interest to you. I was a major knitter. I was a major seamstress. You know, I made 2 ball gowns, lined full-length trench coat, raincoat, suits, designers I would buy. So when I was in New York, you know, fashion was all the thing. I wasn't tall enough to be a fashion model. I was only tall enough to model as nurses and moms and secretaries and all of that. So I did a lot of that kind of print work. In addition to working on Saturday Night Live, I kind of got in with the talent coordinator in 1983 to 1986, the only 3 years that what's his name? The Lorne Michaels. The only 3 years that he stepped away, I don't remember why, but Dick Ebersole came in to produce the show and hired Eddie Murphy, Billy Crystal, Mary Gross, Julia Louis-Dreyfus. There's another woman, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting her name. And Joe, oh gosh, I'm forgetting all these names now, but the main the main reason she would call me in, because they were all the hired full-time cast, and they would get assignments. If they would come up with their own ideas, their own sketches, and the producers would decide which sketches would go on, and usually the guys' sketches went on much more often than the women's sketches. I can remember some tears, seeing some tears about that in backstage, but you know, for a young person in New York, it was a great gig. It was a union. It was AFTRA. Our unions merged finally after decades of talking about it, for better or worse. But anyway, Saturday Night Live. So I worked on there for several shows a year for 3 years. And they would call me when they wanted, well, they told me this, they would call me when they wanted a pretty girl. I don't know. I mean, that's what, you know, Julia Louis-Dreyfus is a pretty girl, but she, you know, was part of the cast, and so she would have her own sketches. So when they wanted to fill out the sketch with a pretty girl, they would hire me. And so I did several sketches with Billy Crystal and with Eddie Murphy, and who else did I work with? Yeah, that's about it. They'd call me when those two guys were doing their thing. And then I had a couple of those short films that they do independent. I had a couple of those on my own, which you may or may not have seen. One was called The Hitchhiker. Anyway, back to sweaters. So, and sewing. So I couldn't afford to buy designer clothes, but I would look at all these designer clothes in the ads. I mean, I was very into the fashion magazines and just dreaming about wearing those things, and couldn't possibly, you know, one dress $1,000, now it's 10, but whatever, you know, forget it. So I had taught myself how to sew. My mother was an excellent seamstress, but she did not teach me how to sew. She was an excellent cook, but she did not teach me how to cook, or crochet or knit or anything. My mother learned how to do all of that on her own, and she let me learn how to do all of that on my own. And she was making her own, my mother grew up very poor, and she was making her own brassieres from feed sacks. Feed sacks used to be made out of this pretty printed cotton, and you know, people would make their dish towels out of the feed sacks, and she decided to make her first brassieres out of these feed sacks. And she said, I made one, and I liked it so much, I made another one, so she would always have a fresh one, you know. Very poor beginning. Anyway, I'm so lucky. Sweaters. So when I really went hard for, first of all, in terms of the knitting and crochet, you know, when I was in my early 20s, and I still have it somewhere, so I could probably put my hands on it. Because when I moved here, I just left all of that kind of stuff that I never use just in boxes up here in these extra rooms that don't get used. And so, but I made I think the very first thing I made was a V-neck crocheted white sweater, summer sweater, you know. I think that was the first thing I made. Well, I mean, I made, the first thing I made was a shawl, a crocheted shawl, triangle, you know, and I don't know if I still have that. I haven't seen that in a long time. But yeah, I just, at the time that I first learned to knit, and I'm sure if you're older, you ladies can or maybe men. My son went to the Waldorf school, and the men and the males and the females, the boys and the girls, there were no in between, the boys and the girls they all learned how to sew and knit. Anyway, when I first learned, the only thing you could buy were the straight needles. The straight metal needles. And, you know, you just kind of, and I got tired of crochet, because crochet is, in my opinion, is more limited than knitting. You could not make a sweater like this with crochet. Yes, you could. I mean, not exactly, it wouldn't look like this. It would be different. You could make a full sweater, obviously, with crochet. But I just found knitting to be, but the reason I just did crochet in the beginning, mostly because knitting, it was just the straight needles, and it just, after a while, your hands start to hurt and ache, and also, at the time, there was a very limited, you know, we used to have mills, yarn mills in this country. I mean, remember Norma Ray? Remember the movie Norma Ray? Sally Field starred in that, won an Academy Award. Great movie. We had all these mills. Well, they all got, you know, some politician, I'm not sure who was responsible for that now. All of our manufacturing left, and probably never to return, I don't know. But anyway, it was very limited what you could buy in terms of yarn, and the needles were just these straight metal needles, and I just kind of put it down. You know, I put it down until my son went to Waldorf, which would have been, let's see, he adopted him in 98. No, yeah, wait, yes. Adopted him in 98, and he was in Waldorf within 2 years or so, because he was already 3.5, so he was 5. So yeah, he went to preschool at Waldorf, and the Waldorf teacher is the one that did it. She just said, okay, you know, I guess I had told her I used to knit, and you know, they were doing something with yarn or whatever, and she just said, well, Kaye, you need to be knitting as an example. They need to see you knitting. And I thought, oh, okay. So at that point, you could find yarn stores everywhere. And I'm not talking about Joann's. I'm talking about beautiful stores with beautiful yarns and different kinds of yarns and different patterns and imported patterns and all of this. And so I started with one scarf. I don't know if I can find it. Maybe I can find it and show it to you for a different video. But I started with one scarf. It was that wide. It was in a kind of chenille yarn. And so, you know, you could wear it. And scarves were very popular. This would have been, you know, at the end of the 90s. Let's see. The beginning of 2000, you know, a lot of people would show up with scarves on. And so I did one and another, and I'm telling you, I was hooked. I have a tendency to really go for it when I go for it, you know, and I was in the yarn store every time I had some extra money, and looking at all the yarns, and you know, just the same way I did in New York. So I was going to say is, I would go to an audition in Manhattan. I lived in Manhattan. We lived in Manhattan, and I would be coming back uptown after my audition, and I would always stop into 57th Street because there were there were fabric stores on 57th Street, you know, south of Central Park. Central Park is 2 streets north of 57th Street. 57th Street is a main crossways. The island goes like this. It's a main crossways street. And there was a fabric and pattern store there that I really liked. It was, and I would go in, and there would be tables and books in the back, and just, you know, I would just flip through until I would think, is this something I can make? You know. And Vogue had a designer pattern series, and so you could pick out, you know, at the time Perry Ellis was big, was huge. I have Perry Ellis, I still have my Perry Ellis things I made. But don't forget, I was, you know, 20 pounds less. So it was very different back then. But I made so many things, and I would think, can I do that? You know, can I figure that out and do that? And oh, I made a well, I'll have to talk about that when I do a sewing one. If this interests, if you guys enjoy this video, let me know in the comments below if you'd like to see my sewing, my other knitting, and talk about it. Now, I'm not knitting right now, so I can't teach you to knit. I wish I could do a knitting video where I said, okay, this is exactly how you do this stitch. I mean, the way I knitted is I would decide on a pattern. Well, first of all, I became a member of Rowan International. And if you're a knitter, you probably know the Rowan pattern magazines. They're thick, they're fabulous. I mean, they take their models on these photo shoots, just like fashion magazine photo shoots, you know. And very complex patterns, designs and patterns. I think I was talking about Rowan. My camera stopped. My card was full. I had to go get one. Rowan International, I just loved getting those magazines. I would just dream. I would go through and dream about, I would go through them over and over and over and think, well, what can I really make? What am I actually capable of making? Very complex stuff. And so I might make 1 or 2 patterns out of the whole magazine. And, you know, the magazine, if you bought them individually, they were like $25 or something. So I'm just going, I stopped. I actually named, I had a cat. I talked about this in a recent video. When I first got my senior girl, Lyndon, and her sister died like that first year. She got run over. And my neighbor her cat had kittens, and so she gave me the runt of her litter pretty soon after Lightning died, and I named him Rowan. Now, Rowan is also the name of a tree, you see. I had named Lyndon after the linden tree, and there were a lot of linden trees, evidently at one time, in the county where my father was born, and the town was called Linden. And so, L-I-N-D-E-N. So I thought, this is great, Lyndon and Rowan. This is great. You know, I thought of Rowan because of, you know, of the magazine. But anyway, I actually don't remember if I actually don't remember. I might have just made this one up. I didn't make up that many, but I did make up a few patterns myself. This is a very simple knit, obviously. I wanted a comfy, soft, and I splurged on cashmere. This is so soft, you can't even believe it. So, you know, when you make something out of cashmere, the last thing you want to do is to eat a meal and drop spaghetti sauce on it or something. So, I mean, I wear an old sweatshirt all the time because I don't want to get my sweaters messed up. Although I do see it starting to peel on here. So I have worn this sweater a few times because it's such a great color on me. Anyway, I could talk all day about knitting and sewing. I loved sewing. Oh my gosh, I have such a story about this one outfit I made. The first apartment that we got into in New York, it was a very dark, it had been sliced off from one of those old buildings where, you know, people with money and maids, you know, lived at you know, at some point 100 years ago, whatever. And when you got off the elevator of this building, there was just two doors, you know, one on this side, one on that side. And then this side, it went the length of the building, the apartment did, and it had 9 rooms. And for New York, this is just, you know, I mean, it's not Trump Tower or anything, but it was just like, it would have been fantastic to have a big place like that. You couldn't find those, gone. But anyway, and this side had, I think, 10 or 11. Anyway, they had chopped off the back. When they turned it into a co-op, they had chopped off the back, which was the maid's room, her bathroom, her little kitchen counter, kitchenette thing. I think there had to be a stove in there. And then this living room, which was the only light, there were 2 windows like this, but it was inside it was only on the 2nd or 3rd floor of a 12-story building, and it was in the shaft. So, because, you know, right across was more windows for the other building. And so you had to have artificial light on in that room to do anything. It was never any light coming in. That was the living room where we did everything, the sewing, the writing of the first book. Everything happened in that room. And so I had decided, it was our first place, and I had decided to have a party. And I said, well, what am I going to wear? Well, of course I'm going to make something. And I can't remember if it was Ungaro. Ungaro was I did make an Ungaro dress that I wore to someone's wedding or funeral or something. I remember that specifically. That was a beautiful dress. I still have that. And, but this might have been a different designer. I would have to look it up. I'm sure I still have the patterns. I kept the patterns. Of course. And so, this dress was made from 100%, it was very fine spun wool, very lightweight, very fine spun cream, off-white. And now my whole button thing that's a whole other story. But at one time I said, buttons are my life. I have a collection of antique buttons, and when I came up here, my intention was just to talk to you about what's going on, you know, being sick, getting over it, what I've been taking, you know, what's going on the homestead. And the only place that had any light coming in, because it's such a gray day, is up here in this bonus room where all my stuff is just stacked up. Haven't even unpacked it. 3 years I've been here. 3-year anniversary. So I go over there and I think, well, let me pull out one of my sweaters. So I see that my button collection is in 2 big boxes, and there was a place in New York called Tender Buttons. I'm sure it's still there. 63rd and Lexington area on the east side. And I was in that shop all the time. Every garment I made, I put vintage buttons on it. I didn't just put cheap little plastic buttons. No. So I saw that box, the cats come up here, and they had knocked that box off, and so it was on its side with the thing open, and it was all dumped out, and I just went like that. And I'm going, okay, I'll sort it out later. But I really want to share my buttons with you. I always thought, I am going to make the biggest, most fabulous wall hanging you've ever seen. Oh, I had all these ideas to, you know, because I was a photographer, fine art photographer, and you know, I had a great scanner, and none of that works anymore. All that technology's gone. And so I planned to photograph the buttons and then make little cards out of them, and they would be my own signature cards, you know. I had so many ideas, and life just, you know, you just don't get them done. But I would like to share the buttons with you. And you know, if I took all those buttons back to Tender Buttons, they wouldn't give me any more than, you know. So I just thought, well, because I bought them at top dollar. It's not like I got a deal on them. I have a handful of old buttons that I picked up here and there, but they wouldn't give me anything for those either, you know. So I still have them. I think I got off track. The dress, yes. I'll finish this story and then I'll wrap this up. Thank you for spending this time with me. Anyway, this dress. Actually, I ought to just go find this dress so that I can tell the story. Yeah. I did not find it. I don't remember. Oh my gosh. Oh, I hope I didn't get rid of it. I vaguely remember taking the buttons off because they were vintage. Oh, I couldn't have done that. I could not have gotten rid of that. But maybe I did. I don't know. I didn't see it. I didn't check downstairs. But I saw all the Perry Ellis in there. I saw a Chloe. I'm pretty sure the designer was named Chloe. I made it was a long pleated skirt, black with pinstripes, with a, you know, straps over, like kind of the schoolgirl kind of thing, you know. That was really popular in the 80s. And I loved that because it had, the thing about sewing is the fabric, you know. As soon as I got to LA and everyone was wearing spandex that you throw in the washing machine, I said, I'm never sewing again. You know, silk, silk taffeta, silk chiffon, gabardine. There is nothing better than sewing with gabardine, wool gabardine. It's just, oh my God, I loved it. I loved sewing. Anyway, I did find the Ungaro. So if that other outfit, I tell you, it'd probably be simpler to go look in my buttons. And if I have those buttons in the button collection, then I know the outfit is gone. In which case I should just go ahead and share the story if the outfit's gone, right? Let me finish the story. So we're in this apartment and my sewing area is like, I still have the shelving, you know, that shelf that I have downstairs that I have all my crap on for like seeds and books and everything about gardening and birdhouse and this thing. I mean, I got all the dried herbs hanging from it and everything. All of that, that unit made out of pine, stained. We made that in the living room and stained it in the living room and put it together with bolts, and that was the room divider in the living room. And behind that was just room for my sewing table, and that's how I did that. I would just sew. I would make a dress for an audition, and then I wouldn't get the job, and I would be like, okay. you know, like theater auditions. You get this theater audition and you're supposed to look like 1940s. Well, you know, you need something that looks, or I thought so. I probably didn't even need to, but I did. You know, I auditioned for a regional play of Mice and Men, classic play. And the woman character, it's 1940s, and the woman character I imagined would have one of those, you know, in the 40s the women had the dresses that were, it was kind of black, short sleeved, kind of blousey with a collar, buttons all the way down, blousey to here, and then it would be a fitted waist, and then a long flared skirt that would go mid-calf. So you know, as soon as I got this audition, I ran down to took the subway down to my fabric store, searched through all the books until I found just what I had in my mind. And it was complicated. It had all these pieces. If you've ever sewn, you know, a blouse with the collar, that's 2 pieces, and then the bodice is a bodice, sleeve, and these are all pieces that have to be cut, you know, laid out, pinned, cut, and sewn together, you know. And then the skirt was gored, so it had panels, you know, triangular I mean, I worked for a week on this. No, I didn't work for a week, but I worked for days on this dress. And then I go and I do the audition and I don't get the job. Story of my life. Anyway, at least I made an effort, right? Here's the Ungaro. Remember I was just telling you, I don't know even how I can pull that designer name out of my head, but I did. And this is the Ungaro, and it's hanging there with all my other handmade stuff. And my cousin had some sort of function, I can't remember now. I remember standing with my parents, and I was wearing this dress. So it's a long straight dress, and it has and that's a beautiful gray button that I found in my, and then a snap here. See, let's get this. So this is lined, and of course you've got your facing. You've got to have your facing underneath your lining. And that's all the edges is I forget what you call the edge when you do the edging. It's been so long since I sewed. And then from here down, it's just sewed. It's you know, together with the dress. But it just has a pretty little white flap all the way down. And then puff sleeves were all the rage with a shoulder pad, you know. A minor shoulder pad, not a major shoulder pad. And this was a beautiful wool fabric. And so even though it's short sleeve, this dress could get hot, you know, because it's wool. But I thought it was beautiful. So I've kept you long enough. Oh my goodness, thank you for spending this time with me. If you enjoy these stories, please let me know. There's no telling how long this has been. I could go on, I could talk all day. It's what I love to do. I love to share stories. I mean, when you get to this point in life, most of what you're doing is looking back, because there's not a whole lot, you know, of time looking forward of what you're going to accomplish going forward. And I did spend an awful lot of time sewing and knitting, and I'd love to share that if you're interested. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you subscribe. Like the video on your way out, tell a friend, and God bless you, and stay safe. See you next time. Okay, once again, I forgot that I did not finish that story. So anyway, picking it up about the outfit. I decided that we were going to have a party, a housewarming party for ourselves. ourselves. And so I only knew like a handful of people and in Manhattan. And so I decided I went down once again to the fabric store to find a pattern. And I'm sorry I can't remember the designer, but it was one of the biggies. And it was a cream colored sheer, not sheer meaning translucent, but very lightweight, fancy wool. You know, you would make something elegant out of this fabric. And it was thin enough that, you know, it needed a lining. So the entire thing, it was a long sleeve dress just below the knee, and it had a slight V-neck here, and you go around to the back, and then it was open. The opening for the buttons went all the way down the back. So and the same for the sleeve, long sleeve, and I just pray I did not get rid of this. How could I throw that away? There was so much work in that. I worked for a solid week on this. Long sleeve. Once again, it was a covered plaque that went over, and the buttons went all the way down. And of course I went to my tender buttons, and I found this beautiful gold and cream colored rectangular button that looked very kind of Art Deco. And I thought, it's not too much because you're going to have a lot. You're going to have a lot of buttons, so you don't want it to be too much, couldn't be too heavy. You know, you've got to consider all those things when you're selecting a button. It can't be too big, it can't be too heavy. And so the entire thing was lined with 100% silk, like a chiffon, not a chiffon, sorry. It was a silk lining. So when you opened it up, the entire inside, including the sleeves, was all lined. And it had a coat, a 3/4 length coat that went over it. And it was open, you know, it had a, you know, the fabric went over and it was sewn, and it just went straight down like that. I don't know what you call that anymore. It was all lined as well. And I'm thinking it had the same sleeves, but surely I didn't do that 4 times. I don't remember now. All I know is the party starts. I look like $1 million. Miss Hostess with Miss Glamorous Host. And within an hour, we served wine. And within an hour, white wine. And within an hour, a woman who I don't even remember who she was or what she looked like, she had, like I said, it was a small apartment. Somebody bumped into her, and she went like that with her wine, and it went all the way down the front of that dress. You can't imagine. You can't imagine how I felt. Because even though it was white wine, I knew it was ruined. You'll never get that out. Never. I tried. So, I wore that outfit one time. Now today, maybe we have something to take it out, I don't know, but at the time, you know, I didn't have anything to take it out. And sadly, I have a feeling I probably got rid of it. But doesn't that make a great story?